Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline Broussard, and I'm the chairperson of the North Region SELPA Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. And we're so glad that you can all join us this evening for a session titled Have Better IEP Meetings. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this Community Advisory Committee. The mission of this committee is to enhance the education of all students with disabilities, increase understanding of special education issues, and build the advocacy skills of our family and caregiver community through education and support. This committee supports legislative activities that align with our mission, and we host events that connect community and build the membership of this committee. I would like to thank the Advocacy Subcommittee, Lindsay Nofel in particular, for their work in making tonight's event happen. If we have members of the public joining for the first time, please check out the CAC webpage on the North Region SELPA website. We have compiled an extensive video library in the past events section of the page that has a ton of valuable information and resources. Much of the work of the CAC happens in the subcommittees. If you enjoy tonight's presentation and want to lend your time and talent toward helping us put on events like these, please reach out to us at advocacy@northregionselpacac.org. I will also drop a membership application in the chat for anyone who might be interested in joining the CAC as a voting member. We currently have no voting members from Emeryville Unified School District and only one voting member from Piedmont. And we also have open slots for Berkeley and Albany as well. You don't have to be a voting member to get involved and help this committee achieve its mission in making sure students with disabilities get the high quality education that they're entitled to. All right, for a quick couple of housekeeping items, please ensure that you are muted until the Q&A portion of tonight's presentation begins. Please use the chat primarily for questions and not for side commentary, as it makes it harder for us to uplift your questions if we have to filter through commentary. But please do hit those reaction buttons if you have feelings about what is being said, and please don't be shy about your questions. This session is for you. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce DJ Tomko from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, who will take us through the highlights of their updated resource titled IEP Strategy, Understanding the Process so you can get what you need. Whether you're new to the IEP process or have been to dozens of meetings, our hope is that this session will provide you with some useful tips and strategies that you can utilize immediately. DJ, we are so happy to have you. Thank you for accepting our invitation to facilitate tonight's session.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. All right, give me just a second here while I pull up my PowerPoint. Let's see. Oh, I had to send in a request to share. Okay, great. Give me a second. Okay, let me know if you all can see this. I'm going to put it into presenter mode in just a second.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay, great. Still can see it? All right. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for having me. My name is DJ Tomko. I work for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities in the satellite office in Los Angeles. So our agency, we have offices throughout the state and headquartered in Sacramento. But myself and my team, we're located in Los Angeles. And so, just a little background about me. I've been in the field of disability services for approximately 10 years now. I started off as a direct service provider in employment for adults with disabilities. So, think of a job coach or job developer. And then I worked for the Department of Developmental Services in their Early Start program. And really focused on that age range of 0 to 3, but also that transition process from exiting Part C services into Part B services, so special education, right? And then personally, I've lived experience as a student who had an IEP, starting in seventh grade all the way through high school. Um, I remember my IEP meetings, and so I'll dive into some more details about that from my perspective, and some accommodations and modifications that were helpful for me and what perspectives I could provide in that sense. Okay, so purpose of special education, right? IDEA Part B services are to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education, or what we refer to as FAPE. That emphasizes special education related services designed to meet an individual's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and just general independent living, right? And so the IEP process, the way we split it up in our guide, are in these phases here. So evaluations, present levels of performance, or PLOPs, goals and objectives, accommodations and modifications, services, and placement. So I'm going to go into detail for each of these processes and some, you know, tips and tricks to keep in mind when your child's going through this process. So, evaluations. These are very, very important to understand before even you enter that IEP meeting, right? There's a lot of requirements that go into the evaluations. And with these, keep in mind you do have the right to have them done annually and can be done more so or more frequently if parents in the school come to an understanding or agreement with that. But something to keep in mind, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record throughout this presentation, is make sure you have it in writing. Anything you request, so evaluations, um, anything regarding modifications, goals, services, etc., make sure you have it in writing or documented from your IEP meetings. So if you don't, someone could easily say, well, um, I don't have record of that. And that's unfortunate. And unfortunately, that does happen more frequently than not. Okay, so typical evaluation, you'll see a chart like this that kind of goes into where your child scores on the evaluation, right? So with this, there's what they would label as deficient, below average, average, above average, and superior scores. And so, for the purpose of accessing special education services, you'll want to fall in the some services or more so services, so below average or deficient. And so, what I mean by that is essentially to access special education services, the evaluation needs to indicate or show that your child is below average or deficient in the standardized scoring of that evaluation. And so, if they fall in that average, which is a pretty big range, right, um, most likely would be denied services. And if that were to happen and you're convinced, no, that's not right, my child really would benefit from special education services, you can get additional evaluations or what's called an independent education evaluations, IEEs. So you have the right to a second opinion, right? And in that, you must clearly state that you disagree the school's evaluation. And again, want to do that in writing. And when you ask for an IEE and you want to let them know this is the route you're taking, also conduct that in writing. And so they have a few options. They could say no, which would lead to a due process hearing to argue that, which they really don't want to do. So they must give you an assessment plan without undue delay because they also will need to pay for it. If you have already paid for it, and you want to request it or take it to due process, they nonetheless they will pay for the IE. So if you've already done it, they'll pay you back for that evaluation. And again, like I said, they don't want to go through that process, right, to defend their evaluation. They simply just don't have the time or the resources. It'd be too bothersome for them. When choosing the evaluator for that IEE, make sure that this is an individual that would be available to attend the IEP meetings, someone that's able to include recommendations for goals, accommodations, modifications, services, and placement. Be aware of the mistakes independent evaluators can make, so you can help them avoid it. And then if you do pay for your own IE and it is using the IEP again, right? School must pay for that. So keep that in mind. So that way you can get some money back. That's a nice little perk of that. Okay. Next, present levels of performance or PLOPs. This is the section of the IEP process that describe what your child can do. So this should be based upon what the evaluations tell you. And then from that, identify strengths and needs. And these should describe functional, developmental, and academic performance. And so again, um, the goals come from the plops in the sense, oh, sorry, not sure what happened there. My presentation pause. Give me just a second while I get back to the slide we were at. Okay. Yes, so the goal should be something you want your child to achieve 1 year from the IEP. They should be based on the needs, right, and identified in those plops. So if there is no goal, there is no need. So that's really important to keep in mind is any need that you identify, right? In that initial evaluation and then plops, you want to make sure a goal is associated with it. Sometimes certain needs will just go missing or just be forgotten about because then a goal isn't associated with them. So then there's no way to track progress regarding it. And then with goals, they should be smart. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the SMART goal method, right? The goal should be specific, measurable, have action words associated with them, be realistic and relevant, and then time limited. So in a few slides, I'm going to have an example of a goal. I want you all to think whether or not it falls in line with being a SMART goal. So with goals, we also want them to be consistent and accurate. You can, with many issues of concerns, you can group them by areas and sub areas. So think of special education rights and responsibilities, and then think of school staff appreciation. And I have a link here and we'll share this document with you afterwards. This link kind of goes over how to develop those IEP goal banks. So it just kind of helps you through the process of identifying what are the issues at hand, how you can group them, group certain issues together, and what should be priorities and how to address those. Okay, so this is an example of a goal. If you take just 10 seconds to review it, just think in your mind whether or not this meets every category of a SMART goal acronym. So by May 2018, Chris will improve fine motor skills by using an efficient grasp to hold and manipulate writing utensils and drawing four simple shapes: line, circle, square, triangle, without assistance with 90% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials. So, is anyone willing to come off mute to let me know whether or not you think this hits all of those components of a SMART goal?
I don't see a definition of the clarity of the lines in this
Okay.
goal. Like, does it have to be traced?
Hmm.
Like, with how many digressions? Like, what is the accuracy like defined
Okay.
as?
Yeah, that's good. Eliza?
I would say they should put as measured by and then exactly how they're measuring it, what metrics, and then what are the actual measurements they're taking.
Great. Great feedback. So it does touch on them, right? But I like how you, Lindsay and Eliza, you're saying it needs to go a bit further, which I would agree with that, right? And it shows that you two are probably experienced with going a little deeper with your SMART goals, right? Especially around IEPs. But it has the main components. But yes, more specific, the better. And I agree, this could be more specific, but still touches on, time-based components, whether or not it's realistic and relevant, something to measure, right? It does include those action words, but yeah, it could be more specific. Okay. Objectives. So objectives are the mini goals that are achieved on the way to achieving goals. So they should move your child closer to that goal and increase their abilities and or independence. So let's see. For the sake of time, I'm going to speed through the services component. Um, The goals should inform the IEP team what kind of services are required to implement the goals. So be flexible on how to stay focused on that need, right? So in short, again, I mentioned earlier, goals should follow the flow of the evaluation, the plops, right? And then from those goals, many objectives should be implemented, and then those objectives are incorporated into the services that are being requested. And that can change, right? So there could be many services associated with a specific goal or objective. And then when asking for a service, make sure you're not asking for it because your child has a particular diagnosis. Rather, right, it should be based on your child's unique needs, not their diagnosis, their unique needs and what will benefit them, right? And how it will benefit them to get to their goals that you were able to identify from the plops. And of course, with that discussion again, make sure to get documentation, confirmation around that topic. And then these are just sample services. So there's audiology, behavior, counseling, inclusion specialists, medical services, occupational therapy, orientation and mobility, parent counseling and training, physical therapy, psychological, recreation, rehabilitation counseling, school health services, social work services, speech language pathology services. transportation, and vision therapy services. And then I just want to give ample time for our ASL interpreter. Okay. Accommodations. So accommodations are usually based on the evaluation and plops, right? So these are changes in how a student will access information and demonstrate their learning. So with accommodations, it's all the same content, all the same performance criteria, and instructional level as others, right? It's just then your child would have specific accommodations that will help them uh, achieve better results in the class compared to their peers. So, for example, when I had my IEP, I had accommodations included that allowed me to take tests um, outside of the regular classroom because it was just too distractible for me. It didn't work. And then I was also able to use note-taking services and also recording devices to record class discussions and lectures. So that way I could better retain the information because note-taking was not a strong suit of mine. And that was something that was identified in my IEP. But other examples of accommodations could be, breaks, time extensions. So taking additional breaks, that was something I also had. That was very helpful in terms of my focus and my ability to retain information. Setting, right? Location change, similar to me, where I had the location change for exams. Special seating arrangements. Some individuals do better up front or closest by the exit of the classroom. Equipment or materials, right? So it could be larger print for any type of homework assignment or tests that are provided. Bilingual dictionaries, presentations. So think of those, right? Audio tapes or written materials provided beforehand. That is something that I utilize as well. I was able to be provided some of the notes from the teachers beforehand on their presentations. And then pointing or gesture response, use of a word processor or a response versus written. So those are in terms of like class discussions and grades regarding that. Some students might not be able to or might feel comfortable enough to have a discussion, orally in the classroom, or maybe unable to. So being given an accommodation to respond in a written form would be an example of a discussion-based accommodation. And then modifications. Modifications are different from accommodations in the sense that it changes what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate um, compared to the general education curriculum. So that general education curriculum is modified to the benefit of that individual student and their unique needs, right? So the child will work on a significantly different content. They'll potentially have different performance criteria, might be different in the sense of like not letter grades, and then it might have alternative instructional level as well. So they might have a paraeducator with them as well in each class. And so modifications could be the same content, just less of it, right? So an assignment that's typically 30 problems, they might get one that has the same type of questions, but only 10. And then with this, that could also mean that the tests that they're given to are slightly modified, right? To reflect the core material that's being modified for them. So again, instead of a 50 question test, they get a 20 question test. And again, just modifying the material in general to benefit the individual. Ideally, though, you would probably want to push for a non-modified um, curriculum, just so that way they could try to achieve that general education degree rather than receive a modified diploma. And sometimes a modified diploma works for a student. But the goal is to achieve the general education diploma. Placement. This is defined in California as a combination of facilities, staff, places, or equipment to teach a special education student in accordance with their IEP in whatever setting necessary. So that could be public, private, home, hospital, or residential. With that said, though, um, you know, we always try to seek placement that is the least restrictive. And before I get to that slide, placement is usually based upon those goals, right? Accommodations and modifications that have been discussed previously and the services that go into place and should be appropriate for your child, but in that least restrictive environment possible. So, with that, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions, um, should be educated with children who are not disabled in special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability of a child is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So that is the definition of least restrictive environment. In short, yeah, trying to make sure that the children is receiving their education with peers who are not disabled and in a setting as well. So what we're seeing a lot of schools doing, gravitating towards compared to where when I was receiving special education services is there are some schools today that don't offer a separate classroom, right? For special education. Instead, they're integrated into all regular or general education classrooms, but are provided those accommodations or modifications aligned with their goals. And that a lot of the time that includes one-on-one support through a paraeducator. And so that's a great option, right? And that is something that is highly recommended in the field and is evidence-based to produce the best results for a child in their learning environment. And that least restrictive environment is key to that, making sure that they're able to interact and learn with their peers, no matter whether or not they have accommodations or receiving a modified diploma and are in or receiving modified curriculum. So some things to remember is that all needed information um, is incorporated into the different parts of the IEP, right? So they're all kind of connected. They follow that order, but make sure that when you're developing your IEP, nothing goes missing. As I mentioned, right? If a goal is identified, um, oh, sorry, if a need is identified, there should be a goal associated with that, right? Always put concerns or requests in writing. So that way you have a paper trail. You can write letters of understanding to be able to prove that they were received also. And then in your IEP meetings, make sure to clearly voice disagreements. You know, we encounter a lot of families who feel like they were kind of steamrolled in those meetings. And it is kind of a art that must be learned in terms of being able to advocate for your child in a way that's you know productive and you're able to remain calm. But you need to be able to voice those disagreements because if you don't, then yes, the steamrolling unfortunately will happen. And then really advocate for not just the bare minimum, that adequate education, but optimal education, whatever fits your child and those unique needs, right? Another recommended tip that we provide is if need be, don't sign the IEP immediately. Let them know you need some time to review it, um, and then you can sign it within a few days after that. This just gives you time to think about it and discuss it with other family members or just sleep on it. So just take that additional time. And then remember back to that discussion about how to present yourself in those meetings. Ask questions, ask a lot of questions. There's nothing combative, right, about questions, asking questions. It shows that you're trying to understand and learn and it's collaborative. But yeah, make sure to try to avoid accusations and yelling, and getting to a point where a meeting has to be called off because of disagreement getting so heated. Um, and a great way to do that is to come to the IEP prepared, right, with questions, concerns that you have, and check them off. Make sure before you end the meeting, make sure that you look through your list of the questions or concerns you wanted to voice and make sure that they're checked off. And then last thought, you know your children better than anyone other than themselves, right? Meaning the children growing up learning, they also know what's best for them, right? They should be included in your conversations, and especially in the IEP, they should be the focal point. Um, Goal should be that they eventually lead and dictate those meetings, right? There are skills that would be greatly beneficial to them in the long run, right? Eventually, if they were to have an IPP, right, they would need to, lead and dictate those meetings, or just in a profession, right? The learning how to learn and dictate a meeting, delegate, those are skills, and these are great opportunities for them to learn those skills and also gain self-confidence to know that they're driving their education and their future, right? And then with this, again, we'll have the slides available to provide you. We have some resources that we used to influence our manual and then also this presentation. And then with our agency, as I mentioned, we have many offices. So these are the contacts for all the different offices. And then you can also find us at this website here and on social media. Thank you so much. So I know we have a lot of time for Q&A, so I don't know if you want me to facilitate that, Caroline, or if you'll be calling on folks. Okay. Any questions?
Sorry, I was talking and I didn't realize I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I think what I'll do, I think we have a number of questions in the chat. So what I'd like to
Okay.
do is float some of the questions that I see in the chat, and then we can alternate between chat and live questions. So
Okay.
for participants, if you have a question, please raise your digital hand. But for now, we'll start with one question in the chat or comment. It says, from my understanding, the LEAs only have to consider outside evaluations. I never understood that by using the data, they would agree to pay. Is that why school districts are resistant to using outside data? Can you clarify? I think this might have been about outside evaluations, and you were saying that if folks
Oh,
procure
the
that, that the district has to pay for it.
the IEEs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I'm reading the question again. Let's see. Never understood that by using that they would agree to pay. Is that why school districts are at? Yes. Yeah, exactly. You're on it. Lindsay, that is why they're resistant to using outside data. They don't, yes. prefer to use their own evaluation, right? But again, you as a parent, you have the right to um, challenge it and use your own. And yes, they would have to pay it if that's the one that you go with.
Sarah, I see your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's clear that we can request an IEE, but a district does not have to pay for it. They can say no. And in my experience, when you ask for it after the fact, you have less of a chance. Then if they say no and you disagree, then you can go to due process or a
Mhm.
mediator. But
Yeah.
I don't want families to think that they will get their IEE paid unless the district has already agreed.
Yeah, and usually, so yes, that is accurate. Um, if they do use it in the IEP, though, again, they should be paying it. So if you're knowing folks that are receiving pushback on that, that is contradictory to what's in place
I think
in
it's
the
a little
law.
more nuanced. There's two different things. One, in an IEP meeting, they do have to consider all data points. So if an IE is done, they do have to
Yeah.
consider it, but that does not mean that they have to pay for it. You have to get permission from the district and they have to agree to pay for the IE. And a lot of times they have a certain amount they're willing to go up to.
Mhm.
Um, so I just want to make that clear to families because I don't want you to think that it's automatically going to happen.
Yeah, I'll have to double check on that. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Thanks, Sarah and Lizzie. Let me double check my research on that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pull another question from the chat. What happens when a student never meets their IEP goals, but evaluations show quote unquote average scores that do not qualify for services?
Okay, what happens when the student never meets the IEP goals? P-val show average scores that do not qualify for services. Okay. Guess I'm having a hard time understanding the question, Lindsay.
The
If you could
idea
maybe
is that the
clarify.
triennial
Uh-huh.
reveals improved scores which do not qualify the student for services, yet in the 3 years prior, they had never once met their IEP goals. Does that make sense? Better sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay. I'm looking at your question again too.
Can I just interject and just say, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I've always had to, or I've always felt like because of that, we've always tried and maybe sometimes failed to make sure we have aggressive enough goals because, yeah, it, I don't know, it just seems so challenging because we've had that same experience, Lindsay. Um,
Yeah, and just to clarify, so you're saying that they're not meeting the IEP goals, but then they're showing average scores. And that's leading to them not
This can be
qualifying for certain
common in
services.
twice exceptional students. Their
Mm,
struggles are masked by their skills. And it
right.
can even happen because of the testing instruments chosen.
Yes.
So there can be many reasons why a student who qualified for, say,
Hmm.
an SLD previously, now, according to the triennial evaluation, does not qualify, yet the school district has never improved enough so that they actually meet their goals. You're stuck.
Mm,
And I was wondering what happens when your data points are at war with each other.
yeah, I think that would be a great discussion to bring up, right, as a concern in your IEP meeting. And again, if you've already had an IEP meeting and this comes up, you can request another one. And it's typically of great concern, right? If you're not seeing how their needs are being met through the goals or objectives, um, typically you could request that and another IEP meeting can occur in the same year.
I'm happy to shed a little bit more color on this,
Okay, Sarah.
if that's helpful.
Yeah.
So, and I've just went through an 8-hour mediation earlier this week,
Mhm.
so it's kind of present mind, but districts are trying to exit students from IEPs and move them to 504 and saying that the
Yeah.
goals are met.
Mhm.
And that's not the criteria for exiting. The criteria for exiting is they no longer need specially designed instruction. And
Yep.
so it's really important. And I love the person who said earlier, like, yeah, let's make aggressive goals. But every year, the district has to rewrite new goals. You can't go back to goals that are 2 years old and be like, hey, we got these, and now exit.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
that, Sarah.
Eliza, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to contribute that that the district, I would advise fellow caregivers slash parents that the district can't just say which data they decide that they will use or prioritize. You're required to use all the data. And so if your student is not achieving their goals, that's significant and you can still keep pushing that as a basis for providing services. They can't just decide that, certain assessments that they choose to be the quote unquote reason for, denying services. That's them leading you the wrong way because you should be the team should be looking at all the data.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Eliza.
Okay, next question. How can you best request the data from the work that they do in special education? Things like the tool they use to measure their reading accuracy. It would be so nice to see things on a graph to look at progress, but I feel like we get the data at a point in time only rather than seeing it as a whole. So for example, when you're like having an IEP and they're doing data measurement, it's like they did, on this particular day, it was this. And it's not necessarily something that you can see that measures the progress over the entire school year.
Mhm.
Is that fair,
Yeah,
Rochelle?
that's
Yes, thank you.
how you can best request that data, right? And use it differently is to request it. I know it sounds silly and simple, but in your IEP, knowing what they've provided in the past, right? Asking and clarifying if that is something that they can give you. And if you have an example of what that would look like, you could show them, and that'd be really powerful. Because then they'd be like, okay, this is what you want. All right, we see it, we know what it looks like. Because a lot of time, right, if you ask for something, they'll only give you what they know what to provide, unfortunately, right? And so if you're looking for something very specific, you can give them an example of what that would look like, and they can place that in the IEP as something to report.
I think if it's okay, I just mean even much more simply, like, and I can't remember
Mhm.
the tool that they use, but again, for something as simple and specific, not simple, but specific, is a SMART goal, like around reading, and I can't remember
Mhm.
the tool that they use, but again, you might just get it at that point in time versus like looking at it over the school year or over the 3-year period and measuring the goals. And I feel like we just get so many little chunks of data rather than so I guess I'm just asking. I saw somebody else put in the chat, like, how can you go into
Yeah.
these meetings more informed? Like, how can you have all the same data points that the school or the district is looking at, like all of the things
Mhm.
like the CASP and the STARS and
Yeah.
the tools that they're using at the school.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we get those in spits and furts, but spurts and fits, but we never get them to look at all at one time. So we never really get to have the good conversation.
Yeah, I would say prior to the IEP is request all the updated data points, right, that they have. And then that way you can have time to review them all in as one, right? Heading into that meeting. So that way you're more informed. So requesting that information while you're in the process of scheduling your annual meeting.
I think just from my own lived experience, this is also where those short-term objectives are really important in the
Mm,
IEPs, that you should be getting progress reports. In my
yeah.
district, they align with report card periods. So you're
Mm,
able to adequately measure progress. To me, in my experience, that's the linchpin to ensure that you are making progress toward IEP goals, is setting those like laddered metrics using those short-term objectives. So
mm,
for example, if it's a reading goal or a math goal, the percentage of accuracy is sort of climbing toward the annual goal. And then you're adjusting, whatever it is, like out of two or three testing sessions or whatever it is, right? But that you're stepping up toward that main goal. And that's another way that you can measure progress. But I agree with DJ. You should ask for those metrics that you want to see, right? So if it's specific state testing scores or other types of tests, you should be able to request those and get those from your district. I mean, they're collecting the data anyway and reporting it as a district overall, so that you should be able to get your individual students' data.
Thank you.
Okay, any live questions? I'm going to switch my screen real quick to make sure I can see hands raised. Forgive me if I butcher your name. Rongpan? Wong?
Oh, no, my name is Ting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. The name appears on that is different. So I just run into a very strange situation because my kid is like first grade now, and they did the triennial before going to the kindergarten from preschool, and then I remember they did another triennial before they even before that year, just because like we were trying to see if he's capable in doing that like in the TK or not. But they turned out okay, yeah, let's stay one more year at the preschool before going to the kindergarten. However, right now I received email saying that, oh yeah, your son is due for another triennial. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And but so I looked through all the IEP meeting notes, and it seems like they did do a full assessment with the psychiatrist, but however, none of the reports are found from that year. Is that possibly happened? Because like that seems very strange to me. And it seems like they have to send out some kind of like procedure guard before they do anything. So right now it's kind of mystery. And they are kind of like pushing me to do a triennial right now, which I don't think is I don't think it's time yet for the appropriate assessment yet.
okay. And just a clarifying question, you said that they don't have record of it, of the other
Ye-
triennial?
Yeah, so that's why I'm so confused too. But on under the IEP meeting, like all the meeting notes, it did say, oh yeah, full assessment was done, blah 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 blah. The psychiatrist did mention like did actually speak in the meeting too. So
Hmm.
that's why I am very confused now. And they said like, oh yeah, things are uploaded like maybe in a different way, but they cannot find it. So what happened in this situation? Are they still going to be pushed for another triennial to be done, or well, what could possibly happen?
Yeah, that just another clarification. So you said your child's in first grade now?
Right. Yes, right now it's first grade.
Oh, okay. And then you said you had the triennial review when?
So it was done in 2024. So
Okay.
there was one done in 2023. We're hoping that he can go to TK, but he stayed one more year in the preschool. And then there's another one done in 2024. So like based on all the record, all the IEP meeting notes and everything. However,
Okay.
like, so the next triennial should be due next year, which is 2027, but they're emailing me right now, say like, oh, it's due this year.
Okay. Have you provided them with confirmation that you already conducted the triennial review on these dates? And do you
I
have any?
well, I did provide it. I did provide
Mhm.
my like all the IEP notes with the
Hmm.
information that like
Oh,
showing that
great.
it was done. But
Yeah.
however, I never received the report either myself.
You never received the original report.
No, I never received the psychoeducational report from 2024, but I received one from 2023. But from all the record and
Hmm.
the note, it seems one was done in 2024. So is there some like
Y-
some issues with the district if they are doing that?
yeah, you should be able to access the report and the outcomes of that. You said there was a additional assessment done, right, in 2024?
I never received any report.
Okay. And
Yeah.
when you have requested the report, they said they don't have it on file.
I don't remember at that time.
Hmm.
I don't remember at
Okay.
the time, but like under the IEP meeting, there's detailed note saying the psychiatrist spoke in a meeting regarding about like his assessment of Vincent. Oh, well, of my child. So
Okay. I would say first start with requesting if they have the documentation from 2024. But I thought you had mentioned you already did request that, or you haven't requested it.
I did, but I
Oh,
mean, they seems moving very slow.
okay.
They
Yes.
seem moving very slow, and then nobody can answer my question, and I have to send like multiple emails to follow up, and
Mm,
still no answer.
okay. All right. So yeah, persistence is key with those folks. Do you know if by chance, like, a case manager changed or the folks that you've been in contact with are still employed with the school district?
Well, I mean, all the case manager has changed so far. I mean, the preschool case manager, and then there was like a kindergarten case manager, and then right now is like the first grade case manager. They're all different case managers.
Okay. Yeah, so I see Eliza's hand. I'm not sure if it's a question or a response to this.
Is a response.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Leslie.
Um, so under California Ed Code, the school has to provide you copies of your records, or at least an ability to inspect it. You can do it in person, or you can, have electronic copy or hard copy. But you have a right to inspect your students' records under Cal Ed Code, and they have to provide it within 5 business days, not including the breaks.
Always 5 business days.
Correct.
Oh, thank you so much for the clarification.
And sometimes letting folks know that you're prepared to file a formal complaint helps to get the wheel moving a little bit quicker. So maybe in one of your future correspondence, if you find that they're still not responding, say,
Mhm.
we may need to file a formal complaint if you don't respond to the request for this information.
Okay, is
We
it?
take that step, but sometimes it's necessary if folks are not being responsive.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do they? Is that do all the coordinator communicate with each other? Because like it seems that involve like a preschool coordinator, and right now it's the elementary coordinator. I feel like the case manager should be coordinating or talking to both of them and see like to solve the issue. But right now it has been waiting for like almost like 3 weeks and nothing got resolved.
They should be. Yeah, the short answer is yeah, they should be coordinating with one another.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I guess I will just have to push a little bit harder in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can even reference that ed code regarding the 5 days requirement, right, to get the documentation to you. Just that would apply some pressure too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay, I want to uplift JJ's question. I think he's referencing service logs, but correct me if I'm wrong, JJ. What if a parent asks for the logs but instead receives summaries? Is there a reason not to provide logs?
I can't think of a reason why they would not provide logs. Uh, that raises a concern that they don't have the logs. So ye Now, if they're just giving you summaries, yeah, you can respond back clarifying, can I also please have the logs?
Eliza,
The logs count as student records.
Mhm.
thank you, Eliza. Okay, for modifications, does the child always have to ask for them in the moment, or can the teachers be expected to modify without the child always having to ask? It's challenging for so many reasons for the child to always have to ask for, I'm not sure if that's codified assignments. I want to understand what is reasonable from the teacher's end, but also want to advocate for this.
I missed the first portion of the
So
question.
for modifications, does the
Oh,
student
for
always have to
modifications.
ask for them in the moment, or should the teachers be expected to modify without the student always having to ask?
Yeah, for modifications,
I'm happy to
no,
clarify
say the,
if you want me to. I guess
yeah.
that what this looks like is having to do it 6 times a day. Sometimes when you're asked, I mean, I guess that's exaggerating a bit, but let's say you're always having to, after each class, make time to ask for having a shortened homework assignment or a
Mm,
shortened reading assignment or having to constantly check in. So we both understand the child advocating for themselves, of course, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it just becomes problematic, for example, when they only have 4 minutes to pass in class. And
Mhm.
just trying to track that when you add in things like an ADHD, in the mix,
Yeah.
diagnosis in the mix. So just wondering what's typical. I just want to have realistic expectations. If kids really constantly have to ask, or if it's ever really more built into the teacher's practice.
No, it should be built into the teacher's practice. Um, they'll they should be aware of the modifications specific to each individual student, right? Including accommodations. It shouldn't be something that should be, yeah, a student or a parent even should be reminding the teacher of. And so, yeah, it's reasonable. The expectation is reasonable that the teachers know of and are implementing the modifications as agreed upon in the IEP. And so if you're having consistent concerns and issues with that, you can bring that to the attention of your IEP team as well, and brainstorm with them how to address this, why, and ask them, why would this be happening, right? Are there additional conversations that can be had with the teacher, and can the teacher please be included in this next IEP meeting?
If it's okay, I just imagine maybe other parents experience this, but we bring it up all the time, constantly. And it just seems like
Mm,
I thought it was an unrealistic expectation. That's why I'm asking. Um, so thanks. Good to know. Keep pushing.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you can request teachers, yeah, to attend those IEP meetings as well.
Any other live questions before I pull another from the chat? I'm gonna take a quick scan, see if I see any hands raised. Okay, I'm going back to the chats. This was my observation. So oftentimes, I think this was in response to your comment about families and caregivers coming prepared to the meeting. And I find in my lived experience, it's hard to come fully prepared sometimes because you don't get the IEP documents before the meeting. You
Right.
come into the meeting and that's the first time you're seeing your
Hmm.
students' progress on goals, their
Yeah.
suggestions for new goals. Can families insist that IEP documents be received X days before the meeting so that they can independently evaluate whether or not goals were met and the appropriateness of new goals being suggested?
Yes, absolutely. You know, it just depends. In the planning stages, you'd be planning the IEP meeting months in advance. most likely, right? And at that point, you would want to make that request clear, and ask, please have IEP all documentation notes available sent to me 10 business days prior to this date. Absolutely, 100% reasonable. And at that point, yeah, you'd be giving them ample time to provide all documentation as well. Yeah, if it's coming up the night before and you're asking for it, then yeah, you're probably not going to get it, right? So yeah, giving yourself plenty of time to notify them, and then and if that date's getting closer and closer and they still haven't given it to you, make sure to conduct your follow-up. Yeah, definitely request as soon as you're scheduling that meeting.
Fantastic. I'm gonna look and any other live questions? Feel free to raise your digital hand. In the meantime, I will pull another question from the chat. This question is, how do we request an evaluation of IEP goals earlier than the annual meeting? Do we send a message to their case manager to request?
Short answer, yes. Yes. So you can, I'm trying to find the question. Who's it from?
Google Pixel 9 at 7:25 p.m.
Okay. Okay. You said what time was it at?
7:25.
Okay, 7:25. I
It's
see it
a
now.
little green
Thank you.
icon that says GP, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do better with being able to read the questions. Okay. Yes, so you would send a message to their case manager, to your case manager to request another meeting beforehand.
Okay. We can go right to the next one, DJ, from JJ Kotler about the standard practice.
Okay. So standard practice provides objectives for goals that are incremental within the year. Okay. Okay, or are the objectives built over time without parent input? Should parents request the roadmap objectives? Yes. Well, so first question, is it standard practice to provide the objectives for goals that are incremental within the year when developing the annual IEP? I don't quite understand that first question. So if you want to come off
It
mute and maybe clarify that.
on the SACE forms for IEPs, there's usually like a trimester one, trimester two, trimester three spot where they're supposed to
Right.
report on progress. And there's a space above that progress report where they can enter in the measured goal for to get toward the annual goal. So say you want them to trace the triangle with 90% accuracy and their present levels is 20% accuracy. Maybe trimester one is 40% accuracy, then
Hmm.
60, then 90, right? Incrementally progressing, and then you can see if you're on track or not to meet that annual goal a little bit more easily. I think that's what JJ is getting at.
Okay. Yeah, that is the standard practice and recommended practice. And then or other objectives built over time. So they shouldn't, I mean, they'll be built with collaboration with the team, right? And so it can happen in both ways. So over time, the objectives, additional objectives could be built in to achieve, right, the lasting goals. And that really should include the parent input. A teacher might make a recommendation, case manager could make a recommendation, but it should include parent input as well. And yes, parents should request the roadmap objectives. Eliza?
So they're not required to put the objectives, but you can absolutely build in the objectives as you build your goals.
Mhm.
Okay. Scrolling down a bit, there was a good question I had seen. If it is determined that your child no longer qualifies for an IEP, but then the following year they are struggling, can you go back to an IEP?
No, you can't go back. You would have to request another evaluation. You can't go back to the same process if for some reason they decide that, you no longer qualify for Part B services. So requesting another evaluation to be done would be required.
So are there steps to avoid that? Let's say your district is pushing for your student to exit their IEP and you don't agree. Are there
Mhm.
recommendations you can provide for folks to be able to successfully sort of keep their child under their IEP and fight for that continuation?
Yes, absolutely. Tracking, right? Tracking what's the data and information that's being produced for IEPs and identifying the needs of your child and showing how those needs are currently being unmet. And you could provide what's called like a parent report, and that can be included in the IEP. And you would want to include that, and it'd be a detailed report as to what the needs of your child are and how currently within the IEP certain goals aren't being met and these needs aren't being met, or goals aren't being achieved and these needs aren't being met. And then request for what services would help your child achieve these goals and address those needs. So that is one option is to provide that parent report.
Got it. Before we wrap up, I just want to point out to some folks in the chat, the booklet that DJ highlighted some re very relevant points from is included in the chat as a resource. You can download that. And Eliza, thank you so much. She's added some additional resources, special education rights and responsibilities from Disability Rights California, as well as some upcoming DREDF trainings that may be useful to you all. So take a look in the chat for those. We're a little bit over time, so I appreciate everyone hanging in there. Last time for one last question. I'll take a live
One
question.
of the first questions in the chat was about if text messages count as in writing, and I
Thank
didn't
you.
want us to miss that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for your own documentation, yes, but typically a text message is a little less informal. But if it is with a case manager, if that's your communication, yes, you could use that for
Should the
documentation.
parent screenshot or save it in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, yeah. For text messages, you could screenshot them and then save them to your desktop as a way to have multiple places where it's recorded, or email it to yourself. That's a easy way as well. And then that way, in case something is brought up in the next IEP meeting where case manager or someone else within the IEP team is like, I don't remember saying that. And then you could easily pull it up from your email stating like, well, here's the conversation, and make sure it's time stamped. You're make sure you screenshot the timestamps too on those texts.
Fantastic advice. DJ, thank you so much for your time this evening. This has been really amazing, really great and helpful information. Appreciate you so much. Thank you all for participating. Thank you so much, Dylan, for doing our American Sign Language this evening. Really appreciate you being here. One more time, if you're interested in helping to put on events like these, please consider joining the CAC subcommittees. There is a voting member application linked in the chat. And you can also reach out to us at advocacy@northregionselpacac.org. DJ, before you go, can I trouble you to share the last couple of slides that you had with like all the relevant resources and contact information before we lose some folks? You all
Yeah,
can
of
take
course.
pictures of that if you want to reach back out to DJ.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
and
thank you so much
uh,
for joining us.
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and take these slides and I'll post it to the website as well. Everyone have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.